and step aside. And say, okay, developer, do what you do best. Let the city do it. Of course, it's not economically feasible based on the information I've provided that a developer would step in because of the overall cost it's going to take to do the infrastructure and bring it up. That cost is very prohibitive. If you sold the land, he had the land, he came back and created the CRA, established some values and what he's going to put on it, you could have a better understanding of where you're going. You know, we want development. That was the whole deal, was to get it going. And when we started 10 or 11 years ago, it was relatively simple. It wasn't as complex as this. Or I would have never gotten into it personally. This is way too complex. And it's not what government does. We don't do it well. You know, it seems like a developer does a development, so you should do governmental entities. I don't know how you sell this property and just say it's up for sale. You want it, buy it, get out of it. You're not going to get what you want along the riverfront. That's a dream. Maybe it's not doable. It might not be doable. If you get a little piece of it and you create a park, which is just a center core, that's about as good as you're going to get. In this environment, if you could just go from Dunlawton to the point and say, all right, guys, the rest of it's yours. You might get what you want. They might be able to afford to do it. But this just doesn't work. Suzette.
Yeah, it is definitely overwhelming. It's a lot to consider. It's a lot to consider. I'm taking it all in. I'm just thinking about everything that was brought up today.
It's a whole lot easier in college, wasn't it, when you're doing...
It was.
Dennis.
Well, you're absolutely right. We're at a point where how far do we want to go with this? I mean,
you could almost get,
so
if
far.
you gave them the property, it's worth $5 million. They still couldn't develop. There's not enough money to develop it because you've got to have the infrastructure. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're right, and it's just, but we've put ourselves in a position where we're throwing more money at something we've already thrown a ton of money at, and we're really not getting where we need to be because we've made it so complex, both for them and for ourselves, that accomplishing anything in the long run is going to be either so cost prohibitive or so time consuming that it may not happen in any of our lives.
Mine and Ben's especially.
I don't know about yours.
Bob,
I don't know about you, but I'm with you. Ornery enough to be around for a long time. It's just, you know, if there was a way for us to sell this property at this point and get out of it, I would.
It's pretty simple. If you told them that they had to do all of it, and you sold it for $1 today, with all the conditions, they probably wouldn't take it. Bob.
Okay, you know, I went back to, I'm going to go back here real as quickly as I can to back. Okay, and are we going to hear from Buddy and Company?
Yeah,
okay.
We can, if it shows you.
The Buddy, I saw nodded their heads. They said about $7 million was invested for the property along the, that we do not own, along the waterfront, HRP and so on. They say about 7. We've invested in the pink properties about $5.5 million. So the $1.5 million discrepancy there. Did you pay? Was it the marina more than $1.5 million? Yeah. Okay. So
the peach farmer was tough to negotiate.
I know. Well, everybody bought property probably when it was at its most. The city included. We bought property when it was, you know, look at the Galbraith property. Could we get back what we paid for that? No.
Depending on what you put on it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Does our ordinance, according to what you're saying, Ken and Margaret, that our ordinance does dictate appraisals?
Yes.
Okay. We know that the property was bought at a high price, use the point as an example, and now it may not be worth as much property, but it was still purchased for a particular price. Even though it comes back, it may come in appraisal at a lower property. So the zoning from commercial to the park out there on 4 and 5, that decreased the value now of that property, but we increased the value of the upland property, as was said, right? So now the value of the transfer of that zoning did they pay less for their money on the upland property, and now it's worth more money for them because they have that zoning change over there? There's something to me that's got to be weighed in there somewhat. I would love to see an exchange of property, and then, you know, talking potentially about that 1% that PIF to pay for some infrastructure. I have questions about how long would it take for infrastructure improvements that would be needed for commercial property. How long would it take for that to be paid if we use the 1% like they have out there at the pavilion? At what point, if the city makes an investment, at what point do we get a break-even point where we put X amount of dollars in and now we're getting X amount of dollars back, either by TIF or by a tax base? So I'd like to get some information on that, because there's got to be a break-even point there somewhere if, you know, that's what we do for an investment. On the trail, I'm just going all over the place here. On the trailer park, I would like to see the city keep that. Do some parking off of Ridgewood, maybe do something in the middle of the area, and then more of joining the parkland out there towards the river. Maybe we could have a nice place for vendors or so on. So I think there's still a lot of questions that need to really be answered. I'm not disagreeing with an exchange of property, because it could be value for value there. It's the additional costs that go along with that we would obligate ourselves to, which would be just horrendous. And if somebody said we'd be tarred and feathered, particularly if we agreed to do that, then I think that would be pretty accurate. That $316,000, that's something that, of course, has been talked about. I'm glad Councilman Ford brought that up, because I did want to discuss that also. Was there any type of, maybe not written, but was there an agreement with the city? Was there any type of assumption? You know, I know that the city would make good on a particular investment on their part. Was some of that come into play there too?
They agreed to front end a lot of those costs. Mm-hmm. And then the idea was that the TIF revenue would then be returned because of the investment that they were made. Now, it always kind of had that thing in the back that you would stimulate the development. The development would create the TIF, and then there would be the ability to repay because you had the development. But that was always the underlying premise behind that reimbursement.
Right.
They agreed to front end, and there was a discussion, and in the MOU there was that how it would be reimbursed.
Right. And everything has changed since 2005. That's for sure.
Correct.
You know, what we could agree to then, I'm not sure if the city should be backing out of that obligation now too. You know, or